So this is just a disclaimer. This is in by no way a tutorial of how to do this. This is literally just me trying to do it and just trying to fix my mistakes basically. So if you're in the same position as me, this might be useful to you, but if you have definitely more canvas on the edges, do not follow this sort of video, because there are other way better videos about this. I'm just trying to fix my very bad mistake here, so just a disclaimer there. So today I'm going to be framing this piece up. I have got a wooden frame that has a mount that goes around, which is also in black. Now the only problem with this, I have watched a few YouTube videos and they all have given a lot of more space of the canvas around the border of the image. Now unfortunately I did my measurements wrong before I made this piece and I left very little, barely anything, in order for it to wrap around the edges of the board so that you can frame it up properly. So in order for me to try and get this correct, what I'm going to do is, hopefully, I've seen somebody else do this and it seemed to work. I have some simple lining fabric here, and what I'm going to do is cut some strips about, I don't know, 2 inches, and I'm going to hopefully sew them along the edge here, here, and here, so that when I go to wrap it around some foam board or some cardstock, something like that, that I will be able to have enough fabric here to wrap and tighten it and secure it so that it is nice and straight and flat in the frame. So ideally I would prefer to have black fabric, but I don't. So what I also might do is, I have a bit of black wool here from an old hat and I'm going to possibly make strips out of this and attach here, because depending on when I look at the frame and the mount and everything together, it might show a little white strip. So I'm not sure. I'll see how much I have of this wool fabric and see if I can do that. So I will get back to you when I am sewing this together, and hopefully we can get this sorted and fixed. I think it should work. It should work. I mean, most pieces like this are quite thick and they tend to stay flat anyways. But with pieces that are a bit thinner, like maybe a cross stitch or something on linen, definitely make sure that you have enough space. And also these, I'm going to call them spacers, would probably work a lot better for this. Also, before you mount any piece like this that uses wool, you need to, it's called blocking, where the piece is relaxed and then stretched back to its original size, because as you work on it, it tends to warp a little bit. It's not very noticeable here on this fabric, on this shot here, but when you if you look at it in a different place, it can look a little bit off center, like it looks a little bit like a rhombus shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak this, once I've done these things, I think I will soak this in, just run it under cold water tap and place it on a board or a piece of wood that will accommodate this size, and just stretch it and keep it flat. Maybe put something on top of it just to keep it so this will stop the edges curling and things like that. But hopefully I might not even need to do that, because once I have these pieces on and I stretch it around the board, it should work fine. It might not be actually necessary in this case, but it's good practice supposedly to just relax the fibres. Once they're wet, they sort of swell up, and when they dry out they just relax back to their original state, which is better. So yeah, I will get back to you once I have sewn on these strips, and I'll see which ones I've chosen in a bit. So I decided to use this black just in case that when I go to sew, when I go to mount it, that a bit of white might show through. I don't have the mount just yet, so I know the measurements, but I don't have the framing and everything to double check. But it'll just save me a bit of time just to do it in this. Hopefully it'll work, and we will see. So I'm just going to sew these strips on to these edges here, like this, and it's the same fabric, so it will match up nice. And then we will get a piece of card or something thick. I don't have a lot of people using foam boards. I don't have any foam board, but I can use some card or something like that. I'll find something, and hopefully we can just sew it on, or I think pinning is what people mostly use to pin. So I don't know, we'll see. So yeah, I've threaded the machine with black thread on top and a black bobbin on bottom, and ready to sew these strips on. Hopefully it's going to work. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a very tight stitch on this, very tight short stitch, which is a number 5 on this machine. Hopefully this is going to work. I don't know, because there's literally barely anything on this at all. So I might have to layer it slightly underneath and do it, well, I don't know, slightly, somehow maybe with a zigzag stitch, I don't know. I'll see when I get to it, but okay, let's just get on with it. I have now managed to sew all the strips along the side of this piece. It was very difficult to do because there's nothing here to sew onto, so I've had to use a zigzag stitch all across the piece, so it kind of weaves in between this border that I've actually sewn in. I'll show you up close what I mean. Okay, so this is the piece now. Basically what I did was I sewed all along these edges with a zigzag stitch this way around across here. This is the edge of my design, so I just kind of tucked it underneath and sewed a zigzag all along, kind of in between this first stitch and this scrap piece here. It was very difficult because there's just nothing here, so it's a real reminder to make sure to leave enough space for yourself, because this was a hassle and it didn't need to be. So now that I have more room to stretch and maneuver this piece without worrying that it's going to fray away at the edges here, I have cut a piece of cardboard, which most people use foam board, but I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to use cardboard. I'm going to hopefully just place it underneath and wrap around as tight as I can get it. I'm not sure how we're going to fasten it yet, but we'll see. Maybe I might, no, I can't really use staples, but we'll see how it goes. But before I do anything like that, I'm going to have to stretch this or block it, which is dampening wetting the piece, letting it dry in a straight position so that you can get it back to its original size and not have it looking slightly warped. So yeah, hopefully when my mount and frame arrives, I'm hoping that the mount will be actually small enough so I don't really have to add any more black along these white lines, because they might show through, or, you know, even if that is a thing, I can always go through with some more wool and just do another couple of lines of stitching just to neaten it up. But hopefully the mount will be small enough that it literally just comes to about here, like one stitch over here. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that that will be the case. If not, I will just correct it, and once it's stretched, not curly anymore, we'll be able to put this cardboard on the back and hopefully sort it out in the frame, and it will look really pretty. So until that moment, I'll see you then.
Right, so we're back. Now, after blocking, which is what I've just done here, this is after the needlepoint has been soaked in water. Just run it under the tap, cold water, not hot water, just cold, and I just sort of wringed it out with a towel just so it was damp. Then I decided to stretch it. Now I don't have a blocking stretcher board, so I improvised and used a canvas without the material that you paint on. I took that off and I just pinned the piece all along the corners, and I'd got it as straight and equal as I could. It's quite difficult to do, but it did work. Now my piece wasn't big enough in order for me to pin all 4 edges, so as you can see at the top, which is a little bit dubious, but I basically just sewed with my thread or wool thread and just kind of tightened it around that frame, which did seem to work. So yeah, that's pretty much it. All I did was just stretch it round, use thumbtacks, make sure it was as equal and straight as I could get it, just so that it won't look as distorted when you go to frame it. For example, the letter T on there tended to be a little bit wonky and it just wasn't looking its best. So that's what blocking does, and it's a pretty important step, so I wouldn't bypass it on your pieces. So even though this is not the most professional way of blocking your piece or making it look the best it can, the results still turned out pretty well, and I was pretty happy with them. Just goes to show you don't need professional equipment to actually get things done. I've used this frame technique now for this, and I also used it on a larger needlepoint and actually used it to sew with it. So I tacked around the sides to hold the piece tight as I sewed and did the pattern. So you can do that as well with the canvas, and it actually is quite a handy tool to have. So yeah, here I am just removing the threads, and I will show you the finished nice straight needlepoint. So here is the frame that I chose for this piece. I decided to go with a black mount, which I pretty much liked, and I think it will go quite nicely. It has gold trim on it, gives it kind of old style. When I bought this frame, I thought that it had glass in it. It was quite expensive for the material that I got, but it actually turned out to be perspex. Yeah, it has this film over the top which makes it look really cloudy, but actually you just take that off on both sides and it is nice and clear like glass, as it says on the sticker, which is good because I was kind of freaking out when I seen it. I was like, oh no, this is going to be horrible, but it was fine. It was fine in the end. But the only thing is with it, you have to be very careful with it because it's perspex, it can very easily scratch once this cling film stuff is removed, so I would be wary about buying this in the future. I would prefer glass, but it was the only option I had for the size of the needlepoint I was working with. Right, so as I was saying earlier, I had the mount, and the mount, as you can see, is just on the edges, but there are some lines along the top where my pattern has a gold border. Now what I did with this, because it just looked odd having one side with a gold line on it, I eventually just covered that up with some more black threads, tent stitch. So I just went over a few lines, just cover that up. Now the next bit here is basically me very badly trimming this back because it was quite thick. Now I decided to use staples. I had enough staples to just attach it, but I think in the end I actually took this off again because this card inside was too thick for the frame to fit in, so I decided to remove this eventually and just hot glue most of it because it just wasn't working. So yeah, at this point I was just kind of trimming, just trying my best to try and make it a little bit thinner to fit into the frame. But as you can see, it was kind of getting there. I mean, it's nearly there. It's tied around the sides, and this was before I actually took it off again and finished the stitching that I needed to finish. Yeah, it was a bit of a problem, but we're here to fix them. So yeah, this was it about to go in the frame. This is some footage of me trying to fit this into the frame and it actually not fitting after I thought it would fit, and it was a bit disheartening because I was like, yes, it's all lined up, everything's good, and then it just wouldn't close. So yeah, I was pretty annoyed at this point, but you know, it does end up good in the end. So keep on watching and you'll see how I fixed this problem. So as you can see, it was starting to look a lot nicer. Yep, I just put it into the frame. Make sure to hold it in place before you turn it upside down and attach it in some way so that when I put it into the frame it doesn't then shift. Now I think I did this with a little bit of sticky tape just around the edges, but that didn't really work, so I ended up just sort of hot gluing it. So yeah, here I am. This is the last stage of mess basically. So what I did again was I took out the thick cardboard because it didn't fit. Then I decided to wrap the piece again around it and just hot glue it because I had run out of staples at this point. I was not getting anywhere with this and I kind of had enough of it, honestly. So yeah, I just glued around the edges and then also glued it slightly in place with the mount. And then I managed to put it in, trim the edges, excess edges of the fabric, and it was all ready to go. So after the frame's all finished, here it is. Ta-da! All framed and looking really pretty. I'm really happy with how this came out. Eventually it came out good. I was pretty worried at the beginning because I honestly just didn't want to cut a new piece of canvas to work from, so I decided to just use this wrong size and see how it turned out. And you know, it was a mistake, but I didn't want to waste canvas, so I ended up doing something too small. But you know, you can get it working if you just work around things. So hopefully if you're in this little predicament that I was in with no space around the edges and you need to stretch it and all that jazz, then maybe this will help you out. So this was just a way of learning from my mistakes, and I thought I'd put this video together hopefully to show someone else that you can get things done even if you do things wrong sometimes. So this pattern is actually also available in my shop if you would like to purchase and make your own and do it in the right sizing. I have the dimensions properly listed in my shop. So here it is. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little video of me working through my mistakes and framing up this needlepoint. If you liked this, the full video process of how I did this needlepoint will be in the end screen, and I will soon be making a video of how to frame these properly with proper advice, so stay tuned for that. Bye!